Hi everyone, what's up? Josh here from Alternative Brewing, and in front of me today we're comparing 6 of the current temperature selectable or variable electric kettles that are available in our online store. Starting with the most affordable and then moving down to the most expensive, I'm going to introduce them by saying their brand name because they are all a variation of a smart electrical, temperature variable, gooseneck spout pour over kettle. First we have the Artisan Barista. Next to that, the Bonavita, then the Varia. Next to that is the Timor, then the Brewista Artisan version 3, and of course the iconic now, Fellow EKG. Now, it's been well said already that you don't really want 2 kettles at home. So in comparing these kettles, I've kept in mind everyday use as well as brewing coffee every day. And of course, in every one of these videos, I ask you to like the video and subscribe to our channel, as it does take a few seconds but makes a huge difference to our channel. So if you've gone and done that, thank you very much. And now let's begin to boil down which one of these kettles you would prefer to own. Terrible kettle pun. I promise you that's the first and last kettle pun within this video. Alright, so filling this table up with all the specs, unavoidable pun there, you'll notice they are all the same capacities, bar 2 of the kettles. It's not that they're all that much less that it's going to make a huge difference to coffee brewing, I guess, but perhaps if you prefer to make a lot of soups or steam baths, it might be. Then adding in the wattage next to that, which is the element that heats the water up, and this is basically the power behind the kettle. Something to note here is the Brewista kettle is noticeably underpowered for its capacity, as well as the Bonavita compared to the other 1-litre kettles. The Fellow EKG is quite balanced for its power, and the Timor, for its limited capacity, is playing well above its league. Now, this translates fairly predictably to the time it took to boil all of these kettles, using room temperature water at their max capacities. Now, what I didn't do is bother too much about the 100 or the 200 ml difference. I had one goal. I wanted hot water and I wanted it now. Now, the Artisan Barista flexed pretty hard, boiling at under 4 minutes. And for what I thought would have been the standout winner here within the Timor kettle, it did this weird thing where it stops and pulse heated right up until the correct temperature, which added like an extra 20 or 30 seconds to the overall time, even when I just wanted it to boil, which was a little bit frustrating. But you know the saying, I guess, a watch pot never boils, so honestly, it is best to look away with this one. The Fellow and the Varia came in respectively close, and the Bonavita and the Brewista came in lucky lasts over 5 minutes. Alright, so before we move on with this, and I was really intrigued by it, and I don't know if anyone else noticed the small detail on the Timor kettle that showed the decimal place within the temperature reading. And this kind of got me thinking that maybe there is an advantage to an ultra precise temperature variable kettle, but no. Each kettle I checked, and then checked again for temperature accuracy, they were all within their expected range of 0.5 to 1 degree Celsius of temperature readings, and nothing was whack and out of calibration. So not being able to program the Timor to its decimal place, but just kind of have it show up on the display, to me seems like an unnecessary detail. Now, another unnecessary detail that some of us want to know about these kettles is how loud they are whilst they're boiling. And in my testing, I don't know, it was like 55 decibels was the loudest and 48 decibels was the quietest. That's like me talking like this and me talking like this. I don't see any deal breakers here, and for the most part, they were all really close within these results. This is another good segue though to the next test, temperature stability. Now, if you consider that all of these kettles have a hold function where when activated, they'll hold your set temperature for up to an hour, unless you're the Varia kettle, then you can hold your set temperature for upwards of 12 hours. 12 hours! We're just gonna get a sauna up in this place. But seriously, looking at how these kettles hold their heat over a 10-minute period after boiling them and then switching them all off and then not using the hold function, I thought would show some interesting but useless results, and I was wrong. They were all miserably close. But the Timor kettle, which I feel like I've been a little harsh on too much already, wait till you get to the controls. What it does have going for it is the ability to reheat the water automatically after you removed the kettle off the base and then placed it back down again without touching any buttons. Which for coffee brewing, especially pour overs, if you're using a bloom to pulse pouring, is a pretty cool feature to have, and only the fellow Stag EKG shares this unique feature. It is necessary to add that it also has an anti-boil dry feature to it as well. Now, I didn't test that particular feature, but it makes sense to have with an automatic boil. Again, none of the other kettles have an anti-boil dry feature to them. Now, while we're on the topic of features, I'm a big fan of the boil button, where it takes one press of a button and your kettle goes straight to boiling. And you'll find this feature on the Artisan Barista, the Time More kettle, and the Brewista Artisan version 3. Bonus points goes to the Barista kettle as well for having preset temperatures too. The Bonavita is another that has preset temperatures, and this allows you to navigate your temperature ranges quickly. It's a small detail, but one that is helpful. Now, the Brewista also has a timer, so does the Varia and the fellow EKG, and this will come in handy if you're brewing no scales or scales no timer. I haven't heard anyone using this feature to any great degree, but it is one that's available if it interests you. Temperature range. Now, I'm a big fan again of a wider range of temperatures, and the Varia flexes hard here with a range from 20 degrees Celsius to boiling, which is pretty impressive. The Time More and the Brewista and the Fellow all have 40 degrees to boiling, and the others are pretty close at 57 and 60 degrees Celsius to boiling. Now, how this plays out in the real world for coffee brewing: 80 degrees, 85, 93, 94, 95 degrees Celsius. These are the temps that I use a fair bit. And at the moment, I've set my kettle to 85 degrees Celsius for the hot water in my long black. And then I boil the kettle after that for my manual brewing of an espresso. The lower temperatures I have found really handy for melting chocolate, as well as brewing teas, where you will discover a large range again of recommended temperatures for different teas when steeping them. Okay, so what's left here is flow rates and then the overall design choices. For flow rate, I had each kettle at its capacity and then boiling before testing their maximum flow rates. And it was pretty well divided into two camps. There were those that naturally poured slow and then those that naturally poured fast. I would be a little bit frustrated by the slower pourers if I was using them more often for other than brewing coffee. Like the fellow Stag, for example, took almost a whole minute to empty out less than a litre, whereas the Brewista took only 20 seconds to empty out a full litre. Interestingly, the Artisan Barista, this has two flow restrictors that come with the kettle. You can add these to the inside of the spout, and then this reduces the maximum flow rate down to 19 mils a second for the largest restrictor, and then a painful 9 mils a second for the smallest restrictor. And I say painful because you are holding this kettle at an almost horizontal position, trying to get the water to leave the kettle as fast as possible for almost 2 minutes. Now, these restrictors though do help maintain slower pour rates, where you're usually aiming for, say, the 5 to 8 mils a second, much less during a bloom perhaps, when you're making pour over coffee. And that's really about it when you're looking at the gooseneck spouts on these kettles. Beyond that, I don't really see any particular application to a gooseneck spout. So if you're not into pour over coffees and could shrug this gooseneck spout off, but you are after all the rest of the other features, currently it is only the fellow Corvo kettle with a larger open spout that is available. So do check that out from this link up above. But when looking at the slow pouring, I found weighing each kettle without water helped me understand the ease of holding a full jug whilst making coffee. The Bonavita was very comfortable, being quite light, and the handles of the kettles played a small role in their ergonomics. The Artisan Barista, Time More, and Fellow were all pretty well similar, and I didn't mind Bonavita's finger groove either, nor the Brewista's curved handle. My least favorite would have been the Varia. It's okay, but I feel like it could have been executed better. Now, in pouring slow with them all, I was a little bit on the fence as to which one poured slow the best. Moving from a slow pour to as slow as it could go before it stalls, and then starting the pour up again. At a height, There was some advantage to some of the kettle spouts, but I don't see any significant breakup in the flow of the water from any of them, especially when I'm making a pour over coffee. I'm always pretty close over the slurry and certainly no more than 10 centimeters above the brewer to be too concerned about this factor. Though interesting and indicative it might be to the quality of a pour over kettle, I couldn't say for sure which one was the most outstanding at slow pouring. And I do kind of feel like it is in more part to the user, because something like the Brewista kettle that has a maximum pour rate of almost 50 mils a second, with a controlled steady hand and a hand on top, as I believe this is to help as much, I'm able to get a steady 5 to 8 mils a second from this kettle. But I will point out that kettles with slower natural maximum pour rates do tend to be easier to keep a steady controlled pour versus those kettles that have a higher maximum pour rate. So if you're just starting out with pour overs and you do want to get the best slowest pour rate possible, then perhaps looking at a kettle that tends to be a natural slower pour rate is the best option. And it will also depend on how much water you have in your kettle, people. Just a little bit more than you need will go a long way in controlling that kettle and its pour. But I do say that and do something completely different myself, where I just fill the kettle up, say, yep, that's about right, and I go from there. But within those details, and I could probably call this the summary on each of these kettles too now, the Artisan Barista, it's a bit of a chunky kettle. Big base, big kettle, but it boils the fastest. Really simple and straightforward controls, which I love. It has a seal inside the lid. Now this is going to help have no water pouring out if you are slightly beyond that horizontal. And beyond that, the bonus is these flow restrictors. These are awesome to have and great to experiment with. And then overall, the Barista kettle, it's a great kettle to own, and it also comes in matte white. And the second bonus is that it is the most affordable kettle here. Now, the Bonavita kettle weirdly holds 1 liter because it feels so much more compact than that. It would be ideal as a kettle for someone with much less space in their kitchen. It only comes in this brushed stainless steel, and I'm not a big fan of this metal on metal lid. Now, I think if that sound lasted any longer, it would be like nails on chalkboard for me. But the controls on this kettle are really easy to use, and it is nice to pour with. It is, however, the slowest to heat up, which shouldn't really be a deal breaker because it is the first thing you should do when you begin brewing. Heat your water up, then go about weighing out your beans and grinding them, setting your brewer up, and then hopefully the Bonavita will be ready for you then. Next, the Varia kettle, and unfortunately I would say this is my least favorite kettle. It begins with that handle, and then the base just feels a little bit cheaper than the rest of the other kettles. It does boil fast though, has a seal under the lid. There is a little bit of a rattle to it, but it goes away once it's boiling. But I do like the fluted spout. And of course, there's always the really large temperature range that it has. So I guess it has that going for it. Now, the Time More kettle. I love the Time More kettle because it's different. And they've dared to try new things with this kettle. Where other kettles can be labeled rip-offs or copies, Time More attempted the opposite here. I don't think stroking your kettle though is going to catch on anytime too soon, but good on them for trying. That choice of having the blank controls with the bizarre touch motion slide for increasing or decreasing your temperature, along with the decimal point display, it isn't its standout features at all, nor is the slightly less capacity to this kettle than most other kettles. But you do have to look away from all of that. It has a fast boil, a good temperature range, there's a seal under the lid, it comes in black and white, and is the only kettle to dare have automatic reheating once the kettle has been removed off of the base. So I'm rewarding the Time More kettle as the underdog in this range. And in Australian culture, being named the underdog is a mighty tag to be given. So the Brewista kettle. Now this kettle, as well as the fellow EKG of course, are keystones in the temperature variable kettle range. And Brewista, these guys are already up to their 3rd version, and these kettles come in some pretty funky color options, which I dig. I wish it wasn't so underpowered though. It has everything else going for it. Good temperature range, a good set of features. Everything seems really well made using quality materials. I love the glass top to it, and it is the only kettle to have a removable power lead. So yeah, I love the Brewista kettle, but unless I was going with a particular color option with these kettles, it wouldn't be my first choice. And then there's the fellow Stag EKG. And this is where I'm going to be mentioning, this is the only kettle to have its own arcade game worm built into its display. This alone gets some pretty big hype around it, but it is also the minimalist aesthetic looks. And this was that first kettle that really had the wow factor, and it still does. It is an expensive kettle, but I haven't had too many of its owners be disappointed once purchasing it. It's available in this matte black and also a matte white, and as well there are wooden handles to replace these handles, which do look the bomb. It is a well-powered kettle that has good temperature range, it pours nicely, albeit a little bit too slow for other than brewing coffee, and overall it is a superb kettle to own. But unless I was going for the aesthetics alone, I know there are better kettles out there for my money. And that just about does it for the smart, electric, temperature variable, gooseneck spout pour over kettle comparison. I've already got an old school Brewista, not the version 1, but a different model that I've had for like 7 years already, which is fantastic. And the moral of that story is any one of these kettles, if well looked after, will last a very long time. So if you have any questions on any one of these kettles, add them in the comments section down below and we'll get straight back to you. Thanks for watching to the end of this comparison video. We'll see you in the next one.